Hey guys, so it's been a while since I've filmed and there's been a lot of changes. So if you are curious what those changes are, then stay tuned for one of my upcoming videos. I will explain everything to you guys. But it's just a lot going on. So yesterday I ended up having to leave work in order to go to the emergency room. And part of that was because my entire right side went numb. It just started very quickly and I didn't know what was going on. And I had a horrible experience in the emergency room yesterday, and that is what I'm going to talk about in this video. So for those of you who don't know, I do have depression, anxiety, PTSD from abusive relationships that I've been in the past, and I also have functional neurological disorder as well as a seizure disorder and a history of stroke and TIA. So obviously, because I have a mental health history with depression, anxiety, and PTSD, I was basically written off. They did do a code stroke. However, they did a CT scan and an MRI of my brain, and thankfully, it was not found that I had a stroke. However, they didn't really do any other testing. They wrote a lot of crap about me in their visit notes, they being the emergency room doctor, who didn't really seem to care what was going on. He pressed a pen into my knuckles, and I was telling him, like, I can't feel it. And he pressed it in super hard, and it literally felt like somebody was just like poking me really lightly. And he said he was going to go talk to the neurologist. Now, whether he actually talked to the neurologist about that or not, I highly am suspicious that he did not, because I really think he just wanted me to get out of the emergency room and not bother him anymore. He wrote in his notes that my EKG was normal, which I actually on my chart am able to see those things. And for those of you who have my chart, I would definitely recommend going back after an emergency room visit or any testing that you have done and reading those notes, because on my EKG, it specifically says abnormal EKG. And he wrote in his notes that it was normal. So that really frustrates me. I'm definitely going to have to make an appointment to see my primary care provider because I'm so over this. They told me to follow up with my primary care provider as well as my neurologist anyway. And thankfully next month is when I see the neurologist. So that's probably the quickest that I would be able to get into him anyway. So I'm definitely going to talk to him about that. I have made videos about functional neurological disorder in the past. However, if you guys would be curious about living life with FND, I can definitely share more videos and talk more about my life with FND. So for those of you who are unaware, I do have epilepsy as well as functional neurological disorder. So just because someone has functional neurological disorder doesn't mean that they have non-epileptic seizures. My seizures are epileptic seizures that are right now controlled by medications. So it's just very frustrating that people judge so much based on someone's mental health history. And just because you have functional neurological disorder does not mean that it is something mental health related. It can be influenced by stress and mental health, but it does not always have to be. So I'm just very frustrated at this point. He also wrote that I came in saying that I was completely paralyzed on my right side, which I never said. I walked into the emergency room, so I don't know where he got that I said I was completely paralyzed. And even when he was doing testing, like asking me if I could move, I moved my hand a little bit as well as my leg. I've always had an issue ever since everything happened in October, lifting my leg straight up with like gravity against it. And I think I've talked about that in previous videos as well. So it really frustrates me reading his notes because he wrote in there that I walked even though I had told them that I was completely paralyzed, which I never said that. So it really frustrates me that they would even write that, because if any provider was to go back and read those notes in the future, they would think that I'm just trying to do these things for attention. And I just want it out of my medical record because I never once said that I was completely paralyzed. And then he asked me, like prior to all this, he asked me if I wanted to try to walk. And I said, okay, because at that point I just wanted to go home. I could tell because he had given me Valium and aspirin, and I could tell that they were basically just throwing these medications at me because at that point they thought I was crazy or dealing with some mental illness. And at that point I just wanted to go home because I knew that I was not going to get any sort of care. Because he was basically just saying, I think all you need is physical therapy, which yes, I do still have physical therapy services. I haven't gone because I've been working, but again, there are updates. So I will share those in a future video if you guys are curious. So I don't know, I'm just very, very frustrated at this point. And I hope that nobody else with functional neurological disorder has to deal with this level of unprofessionalism and a level of not caring from healthcare providers. I think there definitely needs to be more education provided to healthcare providers because it's very frustrating when you live with chronic illness to try to get the care that you need and that you deserve and to be basically just thrown to the side like you don't really matter. And to sit there and say these things in an emergency room visit note so that I look like I'm crazy and I look like I'm just there attention seeking or drug seeking really, really pisses me off, and it's not right and it's not fair. So I just wanted to tell you guys that and talk about my experience. And again, I'm really sorry if anybody else has had to deal with situations like this or has a similar experience in the emergency room. But yeah, with that being said, that's all I have for today. I'll talk to you guys next time.